Blog Talk Radio.
Live, Stock Story with Now, live, Stock Story with Lussier. Radio program about the latest U.S. national politics and current events. Broadcast to the world live from the island of Hawaii. And now, tonight, folks, we have some important discussion to talk about. We have the Wisconsin budget battle, where the Wisconsin governor passed a bill that took away union rights of collective bargaining from state workers. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to talk about the United States having the biggest deficit ever with $233 billion, the highest in the history of America. And lastly, if we get enough time, we're going to talk about should Obama ask Saudi Arabia to supply Libyan rebels with weapons and possibly inflict trouble with the Middle East. So first up, we're going to talk about the Wisconsin budget battle and the issues that are going on over there. We are going to have a guest calling in a few minutes, and joining us, his name is Nick Taylor, an old friend from Oregon, where I am from, and that'll be a great discussion to have his insight on what's going on in Wisconsin with Governor Walker and the Republicans. Did the Democrats walk out undemocratically? Did they have a right to do it to protect union workers' rights? Do union workers or state workers have rights? We're going to be talking about that in just a few minutes when Nick Taylor gets here. And it looks like he's on. Let's see. How do we... Nick, are you there?
Yeah, Tim, I'm here.
How you doing, Nick? Good to hear from you.
Good to hear from you, too.
Do you want to tell all the listeners about you and your background, and then what you think about what's going on in Wisconsin?
Well, a quick rundown is I'm a security contractor now. I used to be in the Marines. You and I did some work together in Oregon.
Sure,
with
yeah.
The state legislature.
Okay, so you have been involved with politics for a few years, and thank you for your service.
Well, as far as Wisconsin goes, the governor pulled some janky stuff. I'm never real fond of when you have to start using legislative tricks to pass something.
Okay.
But the idea that public sector unions have too much power is a pretty sound one, in my opinion, particularly considering that they get to play both sides of the game. You know, you get collective bargaining, and then if they don't like it, they can go in and lobby and work to get the contract rewritten before the contract's completed.
And then they
to me, that's the root of the problem.
Okay. And do you think the collective bargaining rights then should be taken away from government workers, or should they not be allowed to unionize? What is the way to solve that problem?
Well, before the Citizens United case, I would have said that the ideal solution is to simply not let them lobby or contribute to campaigns. If you take them out of the political side, then the contracts become the way collective bargaining is supposed to work, where it's two sides arguing adversarially, each trying to get the best deal that they can. But in the post-Citizens United world, where unions and corporations now have all the wonderful free speech rights that you and I enjoy as individuals, I don't think that's legally possible, which leaves any governor or even the federal government, should they so choose, the only option is to get rid of collective bargaining.
Okay. And now, besides the collective bargaining, and I know that it was taking away collective bargaining for anything other than salary, do you think that state workers, state unionized workers, should be forced to enter into those unions?
I believe, now, under the law that just got passed in Wisconsin, where all they can bargain is salary, I would say no. You can't force people into the union if that's the only thing you can bargain. Now, under a more general collective bargaining position, I have no problem with a closed shop in which it's been negotiated in the contract. Those are the deals you make. That's what negotiating contracts are all about.
Sure. And now, do you think that the Wisconsin governor or governors in general should focus on other things, either raising taxes or cutting other services, or do you think that they Do you think that the unions have a stranglehold, like you kind of mentioned earlier, over taxpayers or the state so that they force tax increases or force government growth at the expense of everybody else?
I wouldn't say that necessarily. It just kind of, I think, and a lot of people have been jumping on teachers' unions, but they are the biggest beneficiary of this. Everyone else kind of gets checked, but education is a sacred cow. You never really cut funding to classroom projects, so that means you have to go over after the teachers themselves. And because we're not willing to reform the system, that leaves a situation where your only choice is to either cut teachers or cut other services or raise taxes.
Sure. Now, Nick, do you mind taking a call? Looks like we have someone else. Would you like to take a call?
Sure, Tim.
Okay, let's see if we can do this. All right, you're live, caller.
Hi, Tim.
How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. It's Brendan calling in from Oregon, actually. It was nice and sunny and dry. And
good to hear from you.
No dangerous waves or anything out here.
The good news. Now, I'm from Oregon, and so is Nick. Nick, you're out in eastern Oregon?
Eastern Washington now, on the other side of the Columbia.
Okay, so, and Brendan, do you think Oregon has the same issues as Wisconsin? What is your take on the Wisconsin battle?
Gosh, I really don't know if our politicians are willing to take that on. I think that they're in a sort of an infant stage of developing similar-looking legislation to that, but I would be very surprised if it went anywhere, particularly given the the current makeup of the legislature and given the person that's in charge right now, who is pretty much going to give the public employee unions whatever they want, whether or not we are able to pay for it. I think that one of the reasons why collective bargaining was, I think, taken out of this is because it was never a fair deal to begin with. You had both sides basically, you had government basically on both sides of the table, and you had really no incentive to say no. You didn't have the taxpayers there on one side of the negotiating table being able to make demands or set offers or things like that. It was it was like I said, a corrupt bargain to begin with. So I'm glad that they were able to do that. I think a lot of this was exaggerated, to be sure. I don't think that this was nearly the terrible, horrible mess that a lot of those protesters thought that it was. And I think this is a deal that is going to be beneficial, I should say, to all the people of Wisconsin. And I'm very pleased that Wisconsin Republicans and Governor Walker in particular were able to accomplish this item of their agenda, which they campaigned on, by the way. It's not like they snuck up and pulled a fast one here. They campaigned on doing this very thing, so I'm glad that they were able to keep their promise as well.
Now, I'm reading here on the Huffington Post. I usually don't read the Huffington Post. I do have to preface that, but it looks like the students are organizing a nationwide walkout. It looks like for today at 2 p.m. Not sure whether or not those students went anywhere, but looks like a couple dozen thousand for Facebook RSVP to the event. But haven't heard whether or not those student groups actually got anyone organized.
I was just finishing up my radio show on KPSU here in Portland State at that time, so I didn't get to witness it. I was actually talking with a friend of mine who's in the College Republicans at PSU, and she said that, there were a few of them. There weren't that many people to begin with, and they're like, okay, we're walking out now, still walking out. We're totally in solidarity. We're going to do this. Okay, looking back and, looking for more people and so on and so forth. She asked people, why it was they were doing this, and all they could really say was solidarity, man, solidarity, solidarity with the unions, and not much else. So I think this was on it.
Back to Nick. Do you think that this is politically motivated, as some of the unions and the Democrats have said that Republicans did this to kind of kill off the unions for Obama's help, or when the election comes again, is that a political ploy that you see at all?
Well, I don't doubt that the goal was to kill off the unions. Once you remove collective bargaining, there's no longer, and you make it an open shop, those two things always end with the union dying. So obviously that's the intended outcome here, is to break unions. I wouldn't say it's politically motivated in the short term with reference to, say, the 2012 election. I don't think that process would work that fast. And if anybody in the Republican Party thinks it would make that kind of difference, I think they're sorely mistaken. I think that they're more likely to result in more turnout in favor of Democratic candidates in the next election cycle, not less. But on the long term, if the law stands, then, or if such laws were passed in other states, it would result in the destruction of unions, and that hurts the Democratic Party. That is their last vestige of a hold on working class white America.
And do you agree that unions are keeping the working class afloat? Do you think that they're a bedrock of the middle class?
I would never use the term middle class, but they were able to give working class workers, during an era when we had a closed economy, the ability to have a middle class standard of living. But we're in an age of globalization now, and they can no longer guarantee that, so they're going out the window, as with everything else that we had between 1930 and 1990.
Brendan, your take on that?
Well, I'm just going to go ahead and say that if you're making six figures, you're probably not a member of the working class, and you probably ought not be considered a hero of the working class. That is the current, situation here in Wisconsin. You have a bus driver from Madison, John Nelson, who's able to make $159,000 in 2009. By and large, thanks to his union contract. I just thought that was funny that you have a bus driver making that much money. Jackie Gleason didn't make that much money playing a bus driver when he was on the Honeymooners. I'm all for, people that work to maximize their best interests, whether we're talking socially, economically, politically, or whatever, but can you at least be honest about it? I mean, don't, cloak yourself in this sort of, proletarian, populist, working class heroism. Let's, call it what it really is.
All right, now we're about halfway through the program, so let's switch some gears. The United States federal government posted its largest monthly deficit, according to the Washington Times, in history this month, with $223 billion shortfall. What do you guys think we need to do? Brendan?
Who wants to go first? It's one of those issues that makes me glad I'm not a U.S. congressman, because really there doesn't seem to be any good solutions here. I think no matter what, you're looking at goring somebody's ox, and you're probably going to have to pay a political price for it. The only simple thing that makes sense to me is you raise revenue and you cut spending. Now, where that happens to take place, don't really know, other than just to say cut everything. I mean, there are billions here and billions there that we can cut out that's, mostly in government waste and so forth, whether we're talking about pork barrel spending, special projects, earmarks, or, even in the Defense Department. You've got like $12 billion in, obsolete weapon systems and, bases and things that we don't use that can be looked at. I think the important thing to consider is that, in tough times like these, there can't really be any sacred cows. You pretty much have to cut everything.
Nick, where do we start?
Well, a lot of this focus has been on what Brandon was talking there about things like cutting pork, making government more efficient, but really that's penny ante stuff. At the end of the day, we'll never get anywhere on that unless we go after mostly entitlements, and yes, defense too, but defense will right itself naturally as we disengage from Afghanistan and Iraq. That will come back down. I mean, comparatively speaking, we're not even at 1989 levels of spending within the percentage of the budget we're using. So obviously defense isn't as much of a problem as some would like to say it is. Then again, as a former Marine, I'm probably a little biased there. But entitlement reform is the key to all of this, really, is we have to find a new way of doing entitlements. Because we can...
No, I completely agree.
You don't have to touch anything else, really. I mean, we can say we want to go after other stuff, but you fix entitlements, you reform them, and you fix everything else.
How do you do that, though?
Well, I look to what's going on in Great Britain, where they're getting rid of the idea of universal entitlements. They're saying, how about we just call it what it is, an entitlement is welfare, and give it to people who need it, and not go to everybody. I look at things like Congressman Paul Ryan's Patient Choice Act, which would effectively eliminate Medicare and Medicaid while providing universal health care coverage without going through all the shenanigans that the current Affordable Health Care Act has to do to try and accomplish the same goal.
Now, Brendan, do you think Republicans, I guess, marginal stabs at cutting the budget are going to just make people kind of scoff at the idea that I guess, they're, making everyone upset with either the Planned Parenthood thing or Tea Party saying that they're not cutting enough? I mean, are the Republicans they don't have the mandate because they don't have, the president that will agree with them on, like you guys said, entitlement reform? Do you think that the Republicans are going to lose power again because their message isn't getting out there? Or do you think the message is with their side that we need to even cut even more than we already are?
Well, I'm going to take a little bit more of a cynical viewpoint on that and say that Republicans, for various reasons, notwithstanding, being able to get a message out there, this, that, and the other, that Republicans are going to be able to hold the House for the foreseeable future anyway, just on the basis of them being able to, basically being able to draw their own districts, with redistricting coming up and reapportionment and so forth. So that being said, I'm really, and I'm not in the Tea Party personally, but I personally, and I'm sure a lot of people that are in the Tea Party are taking a wait-and-see look as to whether or not individual Republican members of Congress have the will, much less the ability to make the cuts that need to be made. I think it's interesting, this sort of budget poker that's being played between the two parties as to whether or not they can cut what they want to cut and, who exactly a government shutdown would benefit. This is going to be interesting to see what they end up doing, whether they're able to keep their keep their promises and cut spending and make decisions regarding the debt limit and so forth, or if they're just going to let the government shut down. I can't imagine any Tea Partiers voting Democrat next time, so maybe that's another thing that can insulate their electoral fortunes despite not keeping their promises.
And who do you think a government shutdown would hurt the most? Would it be President Obama, the Democrats, or the Republicans?
I mean, it's really not even clear who the last government shutdown, benefited or hurt the most, because Democrats will tell you that the shutdown was responsible for Bill Clinton getting reelected, and Republicans will tell you that as a result of the shutdown, the American people sided with them and reelected a Republican Congress for the first time since 1928. So, with a very real possibility, I think, of the past becoming prologue, I think that you could very well see a government shutdown. You could see Barack Obama winning a second term, and you could see Republicans maintaining control of the House and maybe even gaining in the Senate, notwithstanding a government shutdown.
All right. Now, Brendan, we gave Nick a little bio. Do you have a bio about you that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I'm in grad school at Portland State. I have my own radio show, a campus radio show on KPSU. It's called Right Jab. I have a Facebook page for the show. It's KPSU's Right Jab. You just type that in and click like, and you can be plugged in to the show that way. Active in college Republicans and as many things as I can get involved with in Oregon political circles. And before that, I was a 2007 graduate of The Ohio State University, also in political science.
Very good. Thank you. All right, now let's switch gears to Libya and what we should do there. Should the United States get involved? Should President Obama make Saudi Arabia sell weapons to the fighters of Gaddafi? And calling in right now is Scott Spencer, another old friend of Nick and I. And Scott, are you there?
I am. How's it going?
Hey, Scott. Good to hear your voice.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Should Obama get involved with... Sorry?
Oh, just go ahead. I was just going to say that I know you're an Israeli expert, so I'd love to hear your insight on what's going on with Libya.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time in the Maghreb and in the Middle East. Whether or not Obama should get involved is kind of a tricky question. If Obama gets involved and it starts a wider conflagration of anti-American sentiment, it could be bad. However, I don't necessarily think that we can alienate ourselves anymore because the populations there do not like us. I think Obama's stance right now is probably a tad bit too soft. If Obama wanted to not only show the American public as well as the world that we are still a force that will intervene for good, then I think he should. However, it doesn't seem to be the case right now. He's not too keen on the idea of getting militarily involved. And I know that he's sending Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to meet with opposition leaders during her trip to Tunisia and Egypt next week. It's a tough call. Personally, I would like to see some involvement. I don't think that we should stand idly by while Gaddafi assassinates a large portion of his population. And he hasn't had the greatest track record in that regard. He employs 20% of his population almost as a means of surveillance, and he's gone along as far as going out within exile communities abroad and assassinating. He's not interested in human rights, and I do think that is problematic, and I think that if we have the ability to stop a massacre from occurring, we ought to.
Sure. Yeah. Now, President Obama,
it's tough politically.
He said recently that he hasn't taken any options off the table when it comes to military actions, whether it's a no-fly zone or other options. You've got to balance cost versus benefits, and I don't take those decisions lightly. Do you think President Obama should institute a no-fly zone?
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that. He seems to be pushing himself in that direction, and I do think that would be a good first step. And it would be interesting to see how that would pan out. I know the U.S. National Intelligence Director, James Clapper, predicted that Gaddafi and pro-government forces would probably emerge victorious in this. But with the Obama administration offering a sort of passive support to the opposition, it will be interesting to see how he takes that. I think a no-fly zone would be a solid move. But I also, at the same time, I would consider that move to be a bit soft.
Sure. Hey, from Nick and Brendan, do you guys have any insight into Libya and what the United States' next step should be?
If I could actually interject on that or comment on that, it doesn't seem like Obama is pushing in that direction. It seems more accurate to say that our allies in NATO, particularly Sarkozy and Cameron, are pushing him in that direction. It does sort of seem, to me at least at this point, to be a damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of a situation. I mean, if we don't do anything, obviously, with the humanitarian situation spiraling out of control, we look about as bad as we did, in any other, recent act of African genocide, whether we're talking about Darfur or Rwanda or anywhere else. And if we do get involved, Gaddafi has that trump card of saying, this is, neo-colonialism, and it's, the evil and arrogant Western powers trying to impose their will on our country. I'm really not so sure that the pro-government forces are going to emerge victorious at this point. I think it's becoming increasingly likely that Libya is headed into a full-scale civil war, maybe on the scale of a Somalia, where they just flat out don't have a functioning government and they're just ruled by anarchy and by regional warlords or something like that. So, call me a pessimist, but I'm a lot more pessimistic about, say, Libya than I am Egypt and Tunisia.
And Nick, as a former armed services, what do you have any insight?
I would just say that I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, and I'll get into it here.
Well, I was going to say, yes, I would agree that the National Intelligence Director's assessment's probably inaccurate. This opposition movement is very heavily influenced by what's occurred in neighboring countries, Tunisia and Egypt, and I do see this as being an unstoppable situation. So I would definitely agree.
So then the question is,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Anybody?
Well, let me interject there and say
I am kind of worried, though, about this idea that Saudi Arabia and I guess other countries have taken up to arming the rebels. I think that's a pretty scary prospect in and of itself.
Well, it's worth remembering that the Saudis have always been an arms dealer when dealing in the Muslim world specifically, be it Pakistan, Afghanistan, or the Sudan, or Morocco, or wherever. We have always looked to the Saudis to be the middlemen in any arms agreement. But no-fly zone goes, or any other kind of military intervention, the truth is we don't have the capability to do that. We've got 93,000 troops on the ground in Afghanistan, another 50,000 in Iraq. Sure, we've got the 27th Marine Expeditionary Unit in the Gulf of Sidra, but it's got no kind of air support. We've got everything redeployed now to support two other war efforts. We just don't have it. This isn't 1988 and the line of death, and we can put 3 carrier battle groups in the Gulf of Sidra and shake our fist at Gaddafi and say, bring it on. We just don't have the manpower or the equipment for it anymore. If this is going to be militarily, it's going to be done by NATO or the Arab League. It's not going to be us.
And on that note,
that's another reason.
Brendan, I have to cut you off. I wanted to thank Brendan for coming, Nick and Scott. I appreciate you guys coming on here.
Pleasure to be with you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so
very much.
Look forward to this next week. The upcoming shows are going to be next week will be Newt Gingrich running for president, oil prices, whether or not Obama should release oil from the strategic reserve, and about education reform. Tune in then for Talk Story with Tim Lussier. Thank you so much for listening. We had a great show tonight. And just about me, a little biography. I'm the assistant debate coach for the Hawaii Pacific University. I'm earning my master's in communication at Hawaii Pacific University, and I am originally from Oregon, where I earned my associate degree from Clackamas Community College. I enjoy politics and really enjoyed it. My friends, I wanted to thank them tonight for coming on. Brendan Monahan, Nick Taylor, and Scott Spencer. You guys were great. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Aloha.